When people first met Alyssa Monroe, they rarely remembered the sound of her voice, only the calmness in it. She spoke like someone who lived on the edges of noise, choosing silence over unnecessary words. Not shy, not timid, just careful, intentional. In flight school, the loudest men in the room used to joke. Monroe could land a plane without ever saying Mayday. She's that quiet. But the instructors said something different. She doesn't talk much, they'd warn, but watch her hands. They speak louder than any pilot here. Today, those hands would face the greatest test of her life. 5:12 a.m., Denver International Airport. The sun hadn't risen yet. The airport glowed under metallic blue lights and cold silence. Alyssa walked through the crew center with her flight bag slung over her shoulder, her blonde hair tied in a precise knot, her uniform perfectly pressed. She never rushed, never stumbled. She moved like someone who already knew where she belonged. Her co-pilot for the day, Jordan Wells, was already waiting at the gate. He was her opposite in every possible way, loud, confident, comfortably arrogant, tapping his pen against the window as the aircraft was refueled. He flashed her a grin. "Morning, Captain Monroe." She blinked. "Don't call me that yet. I'm only acting captain today." Jordan smirked. "Well, until Captain Rodriguez stops calling out sick, you're the boss. Might as well enjoy the upgrade." Alyssa managed a small smile. "Enjoying things isn't my specialty." He laughed. "Tell me something I don't know." The aircraft, Boeing 787 Dreamliner, Aurora Dawn. Alyssa had flown Dreamliners for 3 years. She knew every curve of this aircraft, every hum of its engines, every vibration of its frame. But this one tail number 4XB71 felt different the moment she stepped inside. A mechanic approached, clipboard in hand. "Captain Monroe." She corrected him automatically. "Acting captain, what's the issue?" "We ran diagnostics 3 times, the mechanic said, lowering his voice, "and we've been getting strange electrical spikes on the right engine's monitoring system. Nothing major. The system cleared it as a false sensor reading." Jordan rolled his eyes. "It's always a false sensor reading, until the FAA says it's not." The mechanic rubbed the back of his neck. "Look, it should be fine, but I'd recommend monitoring it closely." Alyssa didn't speak for a moment. She simply stared at the aircraft, eyes narrowing slightly, mind analyzing possibilities like a computer. Finally, she nodded. "Thank you, we'll be cautious." She didn't like unknowns. Unknowns got people killed. 6:32 a.m., boarding begins. Flight attendants navigated the aisles with polished hospitality while passengers filed in with predictable chaos. Crying toddlers, exhausted parents, buzzing businessmen, vacation couples with matching shirts, elderly travelers clutching prayer beads. Alyssa watched them from the cockpit doorway. 287 lives. 287 stories. 287 people who had no idea they were about to place their fate in the hands of a woman the world often overlooked. Jordan leaned against the cockpit frame. "You ever think about it?" he asked quietly. "What?" "That we're responsible for hundreds of souls every time we climb into this tin can." She didn't look at him. "I think about it every single second." Jordan exhaled a soft whistle. "You're intense, Monroe." "I'm prepared," she corrected. "Same thing," he muttered. 7:14 a.m. pushback. The Dreamliner rolled away from the gate. Inside the cockpit, early golden sunlight spilled across the control panels as Alyssa and Jordan ran through their checklists. Flaps 5. Confirmed. Auto brake RTO. Set. Flight controls free and correct. Alyssa moved the yoke gently, the aircraft responding like an obedient giant. Free and correct. Jordan shot her a sideways look. You good? You seem oddly quiet even for you. She hesitated. I just have a feeling today. Good or bad? I don't know yet. Jordan shrugged. Let's hope it's indigestion. 7:27 a.m. Takeoff. The engines roared like twin beasts awakening. The runway stretched ahead like a silver path into the unknown. Takeoff thrust set, Jordan said. Alyssa kept her hand steady on the yoke, eyes fixed ahead. Jack. The aircraft accelerated. Faster. 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 V1. Her heartbeat thumped. Rotate. She pulled back gently. The nose lifted. The ground beneath faded. The city of Denver shrank to a miniature map. The plane climbed into the sunrise. A glowing river of amber and gold spilling across the clouds. For a moment, everything felt perfect. 8:03 a.m., 36 minutes after takeoff. Alyssa adjusted the altitude hold, sipping her coffee. She loved this part of the flight, the quiet, the steadiness, the peaceful sense that the sky welcomed them. Jordan stretched. Smooth sailing, maybe today's your lucky day. She opened her mouth to respond, when something subtly shifted. A faint hum stopped. A tremor pulsed through her seat. Jordan frowned. You feel that? Before she could answer, the cockpit lights flickered. Once, twice, then silence. A horrifying, unnatural silence. The engines, both engines, went dead. The cockpit alarms exploded to life. Red, red, red. A chorus of digital screams. Jordan shouted, We lost power, we lost both engines. Alyssa froze for half a heartbeat. Then instinct slammed into gear. Maintain pitch, don't let the nose drop. She took the yoke firmly. The massive Boeing began losing altitude immediately, turning from a machine into a helpless glider. Altitude, 31,000 feet. Descent rate increasing. Jordan flipped switches desperately. Trying APU restart, come on, come on. Nothing. No response. Alyssa's chest tightened. Not now. Not like this. Jordan, she said, her voice steady but trembling beneath, declare an emergency. He grabbed the radio. Mayday, mayday, mayday. This is Flight 218, dual engine failure, repeat, dual engine failure. The radio cut out. The screens went black. Even the emergency power flickered. Alyssa whispered, barely audible. Oh God. Jordan stared at her pale. What do we do? What do we do? She swallowed. Her father's words echoed through her. When the sky goes silent, your heartbeat becomes your compass. She gripped the yoke harder, her knuckles white. We fly the plane, that's what we do. The aircraft continued to fall. Passengers screamed in the cabin. Oxygen masks dropped with metallic snaps. Alyssa inhaled once. Her quietest, calmest breath, and forced her hands to steady. But even she couldn't stop the dread that washed over her when she looked outside and saw something streaking toward them in the distance. Vast, silent, gray, a fighter jet. And it was coming straight for them. The fighter jet approached with terrifying speed, slicing through the thin morning air with a long silver flare of sunlight across its canopy. Alyssa barely had a moment to react before it swept past the Boeing's left side, so close the shockwave rattled the cabin windows. Gasps echoed from behind the cockpit door. Jordan cursed under his breath. Oh hell, NORAD's already on us. Alyssa didn't blink. They think we're hijacked or unresponsive. Because our transponder's dead, Jordan added. He pounded the radio again. Flight 218 to NORAD. Both engines out. Total electrical blackout. Do you copy? Static answered him, hissing, mocking, endless. The backup radio tried to spark to life, then died with a hopeless crack. Altitude, 29,800 feet. Descent rate, 2,200 feet per minute, increasing. Alyssa's pulse thrummed in her ears, almost syncing with the aircraft's falling rhythm. "Jordan, we need to keep the nose up. If we stall, we're done." Jordan's hands shook as he helped her stabilize the pitch. "I am keeping it up. This thing weighs 600,000 pounds, Alyssa." She didn't respond. Her eyes were laser-focused ahead, scanning for anything: engine response, flicker of power, altimeter behavior, terrain. The Boeing wasn't flying anymore. It was falling with style. Dangerous, irreversible style. Inside the cabin, chaos growing. Behind them, the cabin had turned into a chamber of rising panic. A flight attendant's voice cracked over the PA. "Ladies and gentlemen, please remain seated with your oxygen masks on. Please remain calm." But there was nothing calm about Flight 218 now. An elderly woman clutched a rosary so tightly, the beads dug into her fingers. A businessman repeatedly yelled, "We're going down, we're going down." A little girl screamed for her father. A soldier prayed out loud with trembling hands. Someone vomited in the aisle. And through it all, the plane itself moaned, metal groaning under unnatural stress. Back in the cockpit, the freefall continues. Jordan inhaled sharply. "We can't reach ATC, we can't reach NORAD. We're blind, mute, and dropping. This is impossible." Alyssa kept her voice level. "Nothing is impossible in the air, only unlikely." Jordan barked a laugh, half fear, half disbelief. "You really think a 787 can glide?" "It can," Alyssa said, "at least long enough." "To reach what?" Alyssa scanned the cockpit. All screens were black. The primary avionics were dead. They had only mechanical controls and their instincts. Outside the window, the first fighter jet reappeared, taking formation along their left side. A second one joined on the right, two silent guardians escorting a dying giant. Jordan stared, horrified. "They're preparing for worst case." Alyssa nodded. "If we drift toward a city, they'll force us away." "Force us?" Jordan whispered. "You mean?" "They'll shoot," Alyssa finished quietly. Jordan swallowed so hard his throat clicked. The attempt to restart. Alyssa took a breath, shaky but controlled. "Try for another restart." Jordan turned to the manuals. "Alyssa, without electrical power, the auto-igniters won't activate. The engines can't." "Try anyway," she ordered, voice firm. He nodded, hands trembling over the mechanical switches. "APU start, attempt 3 now." The panel remained black. "Engine 1 restart." Nothing. "Engine 2 restart." Nothing again. Jordan slammed his fist on the console. "Come on, come on." Suddenly, a faint cough. A sputter. A small digital chirp from one of the dead screens. Jordan's eyes widened with wild hope. "Alyssa, something, trying to come back, look." For a split second, one display flickered. Altitude, heading, engine readouts. Then, poof, it vanished. Dead again. Jordan sagged into his seat. A tease, the plane's messing with us. But Alyssa's mind sharpened. That flicker, there's still residual power somewhere. Jordan rubbed his temples. "What does that even mean?" "It means," she said slowly, "we're not entirely dead." Altitude, 24,000 feet. Descent rate, 3,500 feet per minute. The numbers were merciless. NORAD finally responds, barely. A distorted voice burst through the emergency radio, crackling like a broken speaker. 218, identify situation. Jordan lunged for the mic. NORAD, Dual engine failure, total electrical loss, we're gliding. We're losing altitude fast. Copy your trajectory, unstable, divert south, repeat, divert south. Alyssa frowned. South is empty land, no cities. Jordan paled. They're pushing us away from population. Alyssa, they think we're going to crash. Alyssa held the yoke tighter. Maybe we will, but not on people. The radio cut again. Static returned. Hope vanished with it. 8:10 a.m., turbulence hits. A violent tremor shook the aircraft, jolting Alyssa forward. The left wing dipped sharply. Alarms triggered, mechanical ones, independent of the main system. Jordan yelled, "We're losing roll control." "No," Alyssa corrected, muscles straining as she countered the dip. "We're losing stability." The passengers screamed as the cabin tilted. Luggage slammed against overhead bins. A food cart rolled uncontrollably before crashing sideways. Jordan gripped his seat as if it were the last solid thing in the world. "Alyssa, if we drop below 20,000. I know." At that altitude, oxygen thinned. The glide ratio worsened. Their time would run out. Alyssa's memory, the lesson that saved her. Out of nowhere, a memory flashed. Her father sitting beside her on a worn leather couch, flight manuals piled around them, a gentle smile on his face. He tapped a page in her childhood aviation book. "Listen carefully, Allie. Big planes glide too, people forget that. They're not rocks, they're wings, and wings always want to fly." She swallowed hard. "Dad, help me now." Jordan glanced at her. "You say something." She shook her head. "Nothing." But her grip tightened. Her father had flown fighter jets. Her father knew fear. Her father died doing what she now had to do. Trust the sky, even when it turned violent. The first fighter jet tries to signal. The left F-22 nosed closer, dangerously close. The pilot inside pointed forward, then down, then made a circular motion. Jordan squinted. "What's he saying?" Alyssa interpreted fast. "He wants us to turn south, NORAD's orders. But we can't make a coordinated turn. We have barely any control." Alyssa exhaled slowly. "We try, or they'll force us." Jordan's voice cracked. "You keep saying force like it's normal." But he didn't finish. "Because right then." The aircraft shuddered violently. A metallic bang echoed beneath the cockpit floor. Lights dimmed even more. The few that remained. Jordan's eyes widened. That came from the auxiliary systems. Alyssa frowned. "What does that mean?" Jordan's voice shook. "It means something else just failed." And then, smoke. A faint gray wisp slipping through the ventilation grates. Jordan froze. "Alyssa, is that?" "Yes," she whispered. "Something burning." The final drop before disaster. Altitude, 19,400 feet. Descent, 4,100 ft/min. Alyssa's breath caught. They were entering the danger zone. Warning bells, old mechanical ones, rang out in uneven rhythm. Passengers cried harder. The cabin lights flickered. Loose items floated for a moment as turbulence tossed the aircraft. Jordan grabbed the cabin phone. "I need to talk to the flight attendants, tell them what's happening." But the phone gave nothing but dead air. Useless. He looked at Alyssa with pure fear. "We're out of time." Alyssa shook her head. "No, not yet." "Then what do we do?" She inhaled deeply. "We fight the fall." Jordan stared at her. "You think we can glide another 100 miles like this? Alyssa, we can't even glide another 10 if this keeps up." She didn't answer because she didn't know. All she knew was she still had control of the aircraft. "Barely." Just barely. And as long as she did, she would fight. The fighter jets closed in tighter, engines roaring, their presence a haunting reminder. They were bracing for the crash. Everything inside her went cold. And that's when the cabin door shook. A frantic knock. A voice on the other side, a flight attendant screamed. "Captain, there's smoke in the back. Passengers are panicking." "What do we do?" Alyssa's heart stopped. And the plane kept falling. The cabin felt like a held breath. 287 passengers sat suspended between fear and hope, their fate tied to a quiet girl at the front of a dying Boeing 777. No hum of engines, no comforting vibrations of power, just the hollow whistle of air scraping past metal. Captain Emma Hale steadied her breathing, eyes locked on the horizon. Every second mattered now. The sky ahead was streaked with orange and gold as dawn broke, but beauty didn't comfort her. Not today. Not with every instrument flickering like dying stars. She pressed her headset closer to her ear. Silence. The radios were dead again. She tried switching to the emergency backup frequency. Still nothing. The last thing she'd heard from air traffic control was, "We're scrambling 2 F-15s to your location. Hold your heading." But that had been minutes ago, or was it longer? Time distorted under pressure. Beside her, First Officer Dean Ward rubbed his forehead with shaking fingers. He was drenched in sweat. His calm had evaporated, replaced with the tremor of a man who understood the stakes too well. "Emma, our glide ratio isn't holding. We're dropping faster than the models predict." "I know," she muttered, tightening her grip on the yoke. She kept her voice flat, controlled, because if she let even a sliver of fear in, it would flood her completely. The altimeter ticked downward. 34,000 feet. 33,800. 33,400. A slow, unstoppable descent. The passengers didn't know the exact numbers, but they could feel it. The cabin crew kept moving, whispering reassurances, buckling people in, instructing them to breathe. But every time someone caught the eye of a flight attendant, they saw the truth. They saw fear. In row 32, a teenage boy whispered, "Mom, are we going to die?" She didn't answer, she couldn't. Up in the cockpit, Emma forced herself to focus. Tools, options, procedures, anything. "We need a restart," she said. "One last attempt." Dean stared at her like she was suggesting Russian roulette. "We've tried everything. The APU's offline. The battery barely feeding the bus. If we attempt another full power cycle, we risk losing." "We risk losing everything if we do nothing," she snapped. He shut his mouth. She wasn't wrong. Emma ran her hand along the overhead panel, touching switches like a pianist touching keys, before playing the most important piece of her life. 3, 2, 1. She initiated the sequence. The cockpit darkened for a half-second. A terrifying half-second. Where every display went black. Where every instrument needle fell limply. Where the plane became a giant, silent glider in the sky, blind and mute. Dean whispered, "Come on, come on." Emma stared at the screens like she could will them back alive. A flicker. Another. Then, beep, beep, beep. Some screens came back on. Not all, not enough. But something. "Partial power," Dean breathed. "We've got partial power." Emma exhaled shakily, chest trembling. "We can work with partial." Then she saw the one thing she absolutely needed. Navigation. Weak, sluggish, flickering, but online. And there. A blip. 2 of them. Emma's heartbeat stuttered. "Dean, look." He leaned forward. 2 signatures approaching fast. He blinked. "Are those fighter jets?" Emma felt a surge of something she hadn't had since the engines died. Hope. Try the radio again, she said. Dean switched frequencies, tapped the panel, tried again. Static. Static. Crackle. Then, Flight 93 Heavy, this is U.S. Air Force Falcon Lead. We have visual contact. Hold current altitude. Do you copy? Dean practically shouted into the mic. Falcon Lead, this is Flight 93 Heavy. We copy, we copy. Emma closed her eyes for one single second, letting relief pass through her like a wave. They weren't alone anymore. She leaned forward, adjusting the yoke. This is Captain Hale. We've lost both engines, full communication, and we're running on partial electrical. We need vectors to the nearest runway large enough for a 777. Falcon Lead responded instantly. Captain Hale, stay with us. We've got you. Emma swallowed. That sentence hit harder than she expected. Dean let out a laugh, half hysterical, half grateful. They found us. Holy hell, they actually found us. Outside, the sun painted the fighter jets in a golden halo, sleek, fast, deadly, yet in this moment they were angels. Emma felt the wind shift as the jets flanked them, one on each side. Passengers pressed their faces to the windows, gasping. A little girl whispered, "Mom, look, the army came to save us." Even the most hopeless passengers stirred with wonder. Some cried, some prayed, some just stared, stunned. Emma radioed again. Falcon Lead, do you have a nearby airport? Affirmative, Captain. You have two options, both risky. One, turn south 20 degrees straight toward Dover Air Force Base. You'll have tailwinds pushing you fast, too fast, but it's your best runway length, over 12,000 feet. Emma processed fast. Too fast meant no margin for error, no thrust reversers, no engines, just metal and gravity. And option 2. There's a civilian airport 40 miles northeast, shorter runway, very short, but you'd have headwind. It'll slow your descent. Dean shook his head before Falcon Lead even finished. Too short, we'll overshoot. Emma didn't answer. She was thinking fast, brutally, honestly. Falcon Lead continued. Fuel from the ruptured lines is still venting. You have limited time. I repeat, you have very limited time. Dean's voice cracked. Emma, what do we choose? She didn't speak. Couldn't yet. She imagined the faces of the passengers, the mother with the child, the elderly man holding his wedding ring, the teen girl recording everything with trembling hands, the quiet businessman who had prayed for the first time in 20 years. Their lives were not lines on a spreadsheet, not calculations. They were people. Emma opened her eyes. Dover, she said. We aim for Dover. Falcon Lead answered without pause. Copy that, turning you toward heading 095. We'll guide you all the way. Dean nodded slowly. Dover it is. But Emma wasn't convinced yet, because the math didn't line up. Their descent rate was too high. Their altitude was too low. Their distance was too great. If nothing changed, they wouldn't make it. Dean must have seen it on her face. He whispered, Emma, even on glide it's too far. Her jaw clenched. She knew. Falcon Lead's voice cut in again. Captain Hale, be advised, radar shows you below optimal approach slope. Repeat, you're too low. Emma swallowed hard. She had known since the moment she saw the numbers. And then, a violent jolt slammed the plane. The cockpit shook. Warning lights flashed alive. The plane lurched to the right, nearly rolling. Dean shouted, grabbing the controls. What was that? Emma corrected hard, fighting the sudden drag. Falcon Lead's voice snapped sharp. Your left landing gear door just detached. It's creating aerodynamic instability. Passengers screamed as the cabin tilted. Luggage flew. A flight attendant hit the floor hard. Emma forced the yoke level, her arms burning. Dean's voice trembled with terror. "Emma, we're losing control." She didn't deny it. She felt it. A sickening imbalance. A struggling glide. A plane fighting to stay in the air. And then a worse realization dawned on her, slow and horrifying. If they kept descending at this rate, they wouldn't even reach the runway. Emma looked ahead. The horizon wavered. Her breathing was shallow. The fighter jets held formation, but even they seemed tense, dipping slightly as if urging the 777 upward. Falcon Lead's voice came through again, quiet this time. "Flight 93 Heavy, do you still have control?" Emma didn't answer. Because for the first time, she wasn't sure. The plane sank lower. And lower. And lower. The cockpit alarm chimed. "Terrain, terrain. Pull up. Pull up." Emma whispered to herself, almost inaudible. Not yet, just hold, please hold." Dean looked at her like he already knew. "Emma, what are we gonna do?" She didn't blink. She didn't look away from the shuddering horizon. She simply said, "We are not crashing this plane, not today." But her hands were trembling. Because right then she saw it. On the navigation screen. A new warning. One she prayed she'd never see. "When share dietiacitide." And behind the clouds ahead, something massive was forming. A storm. A violent one. And they were gliding straight into it. The storm ahead was no longer a distant threat. It was a living wall of dark gray, rolling clouds, jagged lightning slicing through the sky, and winds that howled like wild animals. The Boeing shuddered violently as it entered the first fringes of turbulence, metal groaning under the sudden stress. Alyssa Monroe's hands clenched the yoke so tightly her knuckles turned white. She had never felt a plane so alive, so angry, so ready to kill. And yet, she refused to panic. Every fiber of her being screamed in fear, but every ounce of her training screamed louder. Beside her, Jordan Wells gripped the co-pilot seat, staring at the flickering instruments, knowing their lives, and 287 others, balanced on a razor's edge. "Brace for severe turbulence," Alyssa commanded, her voice cutting through the panic. Jordan swallowed. Severe doesn't even begin to describe this. Fighter jets close in. Through the cockpit window, the two F-22s remained close, weaving gracefully through the violent gusts. Their pilots didn't just escort the doomed aircraft. They guided it, their wingtip signals choreographed like a ballet in a storm. The lead pilot gestured with a tilt of his wing, "Keep your nose up, maintain glide." The second pilot drew a circle, signaling Alyssa to prepare for a forced landing. Every subtle movement was critical. Every tiny correction could be the difference between survival and disaster. Jordan looked at her. "They're trying to tell us what? The highway, the river, what are they?" Alyssa didn't need him to finish. Her instincts took over. She could see a narrow stretch of highway below, a sliver of asphalt surrounded by farmland and a winding river. It was far too small for a 787, but it was all they had. "Jordan," she whispered, "we land there or hundreds die below us." His face paled. "That's suicide." She didn't argue. She couldn't. She only nodded, steeling herself for what had to happen. The cabin in chaos. In the passenger cabin, screams ricocheted against the walls. Oxygen masks bobbed down, bobbies wailed, and people clutched at anything they could hold. Flight attendants ran, giving instructions they barely understood themselves. One young mother in row 12 pulled her child close. It's okay," she whispered, though her own voice trembled. An elderly man in row 18 muttered a litany of prayers, beads slipping through his fingers. He stared at the ceiling as if begging the plane itself to hear him. From the back, a teenage boy was recording everything on his phone, hands shaking so violently that the video looked like a scene from a war zone. The plane wasn't just falling, it was a metal cathedral of terror. Cockpit tension. Alyssa's eyes darted between the instruments and the horizon. The storm had intensified. Winds lashed the wings, pitching and rolling the plane violently. Lightning arced terrifyingly close, illuminating the terrified faces of passengers for split seconds. "Altitude check," Alyssa barked. Jordan glanced at the altimeter. 10,200, dropping fast. She corrected the yoke sharply. "Keep her level." The Boeing groaned like a living creature, protesting, as she forced it into a glide path toward the narrow highway below. Another violent shudder rocked the cockpit. Warning lights screamed. Smoke appeared faintly from one of the rear electrical panels. Jordan swallowed hard. "Alyssa, the right engine is smoking, big time." She didn't flinch. "Shut it down, full manual control, we're doing this ourselves." He hesitated. "Are you sure?" She glared at him. "I'm never more sure of anything in my life." The final approach begins. Alyssa peered through the cockpit windows. The highway was coming into view, a thin black strip flanked by fields. Utility poles lined one side like spikes. The river twisted just beyond, reflecting the angry storm clouds. This was it, no turning back, no margins. She radioed Falcon Lead. "We're attempting a manual landing on a narrow highway. Request guidance on approach vector." The response came instantly. "Roger, Captain, maintain glide slope, keep wings level, you have 2 F-22s flanking, do not deviate." Jordan's voice shook. "Alyssa, we're literally landing a 787 on a 2-lane road. People won't survive if we misjudge." She exhaled. "We're not going to misjudge." Even as she spoke, turbulence slammed the plane sideways, throwing her against the seatbelt harness. The yoke jerked in her hands. The plane tilted violently. Jordan gritted his teeth. Hold her steady." Every muscle in her body screamed. Every bone ached from tension. But Alyssa's mind was razor-sharp. She adjusted flaps manually, monitored descent, calculated wind drift, and mentally visualized the landing with painstaking precision. "Passengers brace." The cabin rocked like a ship in a stormy sea. Flight attendants screamed instructions over the PA, but their own fear leaked through. "Brace positions," one shouted. "Stay down, hold tight," another added. Children were crying. Adults were silent, eyes wide, gripping seatbelts with white-knuckled intensity. A man in row 21 prayed aloud, his voice steady despite the chaos. "Please let us live." The little girl recorded everything, whispering into her phone. "Mom, if we survive, everyone needs to see this." And in the cockpit, Alyssa made a silent promise. "We will survive. I will not let you die." The fighter jets signaled the final move. Outside, the F-22s flanked them with precision only military pilots could muster. The lead pilot tilted his wings sharply, then downward, then slightly back. Alyssa understood immediately. The signal was clear. She had one chance, one line of road, one perfect glide path. She swallowed, teeth gritting. Her hands moved automatically over the yoke, adjusting for wind shear, gusts, turbulence. Every second was agony, every correction life-saving. Jordan's voice shook beside her. "Alyssa, you're insane, this is." "I know," she interrupted, eyes locked on the highway, "but it's the only way." The wings flexed, the plane shuddered. Lightning cracked again, blindingly close. The storm roared. The plane pitched. The F-22s remained perfect guardians, guiding the 787 like a fallen giant being led by angels. The highway becomes a runway. Below, the thin asphalt stretched impossibly, cars abandoned on the shoulders, a river glimmering dangerously close, utility poles that had to be avoided, and yet the strip of highway was their lifeline. Alyssa adjusted the flaps again. "Gear down manually," she said to Jordan. He pulled the lever. Nothing. Gear won't lock, she asked, eyes narrowing. Jordan's hands flew over the controls. Partial extension, only 2 main wheels deployed. She nodded, we'll make it work. The plane pitched forward, nose angled perfectly. She could see the terrified faces of passengers, braces in place, clutching seatbelts. She whispered softly, almost inaudible. Almost there, almost there. Seconds from disaster. Altitude, 2,500 feet. Speed, 145 knots. Distance to highway, 1.2 miles. The wind gusted violently, pushing the plane sideways. Alyssa corrected. Another jolt, wingtip scraping a tree line. Sparks flew briefly outside the cockpit window. She ignored the pain in her arms, focused, breathing, watching, calculating. Jordan muttered, "This is insane, we'll never make it." "You will make it," Alyssa said, "trust me." The fighter jets signaled again, one above, one below, perfect symmetry, guidance, protection, faith. Passengers screamed. They didn't know what was coming, but some sensed something miraculous, something larger than themselves. Touchdown imminent. The highway loomed ahead, impossibly narrow, unforgiving, a lifeline in a sea of green farmland. Trees lined one side. A river glittered on the other. Utility poles flashed past. Alyssa's heart raced. Her mind was a tunnel of focus. "Steady," she muttered. The landing gear touched asphalt, one side then the other, sparks flew, the main wheels caught, friction screamed. The nose pitched slightly, threatening to catch. Alyssa eased it down manually. She felt metal bending slightly, heard tires screeching, smelled burning rubber. The Boeing 787 was alive under her hands, screaming for mercy, fighting gravity, air, storm, and chaos. And somehow against impossible odds, she held it on course. The fighter jets circled above. Falcon lead gave a slow, deliberate wing tilt. Alyssa exhaled, but her work wasn't over, not yet. Because behind her, the engine smoke was creeping closer. The storm wasn't done, and the Boeing was still alive, but barely. The tires shrieked as the 787 ground to a reluctant halt along the narrow highway. Smoke curled from the partially extended landing gear, trailing along the asphalt like a warning. The plane trembled as if it knew the storm wasn't finished, that gravity and fate were still testing every inch of its steel body. Inside the cockpit, Alyssa Monroe's arms ached from holding the yoke steady for what felt like an eternity. Her uniform was damp with sweat, her hair plastered to her forehead. Jordan Wells leaned against the console, pale and trembling, trying to process the miracle they'd just pulled off. Hold her steady," he gasped, as sparks flew from the tires catching the edge of the pavement. Alyssa's voice cut through the chaos, sharp and commanding. "Brakes gradually, don't lock wheels, keep nose slightly up." She felt the metal flex and moan under her hands. The plane had survived the descent, survived the storm, and survived the impossible glide, but the landing was far from over. The cabin, fear and revelation. 287 souls held on for their lives. The plane had come to a crawling stop on a narrow strip of highway, and yet the turbulence hadn't fully ceased. The storm still raged above, and some passengers weren't aware they had survived the fall. A flight attendant yelled, "Remain seated, do not unbuckle." Passengers pressed against each other, hands gripping straps and armrests. In row 14, a father held his daughter tightly, whispering through tears, "We're going to be okay, just stay with me." The teenage boy recording everything on his phone had stopped shaking, all replacing terror as he realized they were alive. His mother in the seat beside him whispered, "Thank God, we're alive, we're actually alive." But then came another wave of panic. Smoke from the engines began to fill the cabin, creeping along the floor and toward the aisles. The faint, acrid scent of burning metal and rubber set off fresh terror. A passenger screamed, "We're going to explode, we're going to." The flight attendant barked over the roar, "Everyone stay calm. Follow instructions. Emergency exits are ready." Cockpit decisions. Alyssa's hands didn't loosen from the yoke. Her eyes scanned the instruments, partial power, smoke creeping toward the rear electrical bus, flaps damaged, landing gear stressed. Jordan asked, voice trembling, "What now? We've landed, but we're still sitting ducks on this highway." Alyssa didn't answer immediately. Her mind raced, calculating wind, slope, and potential obstacles. She had seconds, not minutes, to act. "Engage emergency power to maintain partial systems," she ordered. "We need hydraulics for brakes and steering. Prepare for evacuation once we stop completely. Smoke is rising. Don't wait for the cabin crew to panic." The 787 lurched slightly, and a fresh jolt of lightning struck close enough to illuminate the twisted utility poles lining the highway. Sparks cascaded briefly across the asphalt. Jordan's face went pale. "Alyssa, I see one of the poles too close to the wingtip. We'll lose a wing if we move." Alyssa's jaw tightened. "We'll angle the tail, we have to. Gently, glide her along the center as best we can." Every correction was painstaking. Every inch mattered. The fighter jets above. Outside, the two F-22s maintained tight formation. The lead pilot angled his wings sharply downward, guiding Alyssa toward a clearing ahead. The second jet dipped to the right, signaling obstacles and creating a protective corridor of air. They were not just guides. They were guardians, angels in the sky, ensuring the Boeing could survive its perilous journey to safety. Jordan squinted. They're escorting us like we're royalty or prisoners, I don't know which." Alyssa managed a faint, dry laugh. "Doesn't matter, they keep us alive. That's all that matters." Emergency evacuation preparation. In the cabin, the smoke thickened. Flight attendants moved swiftly, instructing passengers to grab life vests and remain seated. The mother in row 12 held her child tightly, rocking slightly as the acrid smoke touched their faces. A young man in the aisle whispered prayers silently. Another woman clutched a small Bible. Fear was etched into every line of their faces, but so was resolve. The teenage boy with the phone kept recording. He whispered into the camera, voice shaking. "If we survive, everyone needs to see what happened. This is unreal." The plane creaked and groaned with every jolt of wind. Alyssa's commands continued over the PA. "Remain calm, prepare for evacuation, do not panic." Alyssa's calculated maneuvers. Back in the cockpit, Alyssa adjusted flaps manually. She calculated speed, glide ratio, and the distance to the clearing just ahead. Lightning illuminated a gap in the trees, just barely wide enough. "Jordan, hold her steady," she said, voice low but firm. "This is our window." The 787 dipped, wingtip dangerously close to the utility pole. Sparks flew. Another jolt shook the fuselage. Alyssa countered with a subtle correction, rolling the plane back onto course. Jordan whispered, "This is insane, we'll never make it." Alyssa shook her head. We have to." Smoke now curled into the cockpit, faintly stinging eyes and throats. Partial power hummed desperately, instruments flickering. The plane trembled, alive and angry, as if it knew the landing would be its greatest test. The critical seconds. Altitude 50 feet. Distance to clearing 0.2 miles. Speed 140 knots. Alyssa whispered to herself, "Just a little more, just a little more." The tires touched pavement again, friction sparking against asphalt debris. One wingtip clipped a tree, sending splinters into the storm. Sparks and smoke filled the air. Passengers screamed as the plane lurched violently. The teenage boy's phone slipped from his hands. His mother caught it just in time. "Brace, brace," flight attendants yelled. Alyssa fought to keep the plane straight. Every second felt like an hour. She whispered a prayer under her breath. Let this end without death. Let this end without death. Touchdown and final stop. The 787 rolled along the highway, scraping, groaning, but somehow, miraculously, still intact. Alyssa guided it between trees, avoiding poles and cars. Sparks and smoke filled the air as the fuselage flexed. "Bring her down," Jordan shouted, gripping his seat. Alyssa nodded, adjusting the yoke to gently lower the nose. The main wheels caught. The tail followed. Friction and gravity did the rest. The plane slowed, scraping past abandoned vehicles and debris. Sparks flew. Tires smoked. Metal creaked. But against all odds, the Boeing stopped. The 787 shuddered, trembled, and then came to a full, trembling halt. 287 passengers were alive. Immediate evacuation. The cabin filled with acrid smoke. Alyssa's calm, authoritative voice rang over the PA. "Remain seated, prepare to evacuate, use the slides, everyone move quickly." Flight attendants opened doors, inflation hissing as emergency slides dropped. Passengers stumbled out, coughing but alive. Mothers clutched children. Soldiers helped elderly passengers. The teenage boy filmed the evacuation, tears streaking his face. Jordan looked at Alyssa. "We actually did it, we survived." She didn't smile, not yet. Her eyes scanned the cockpit, then the engines, then the fuselage. Smoke still rose from the rear and sparks lingered like embers of death. "Not over," she muttered. "We need to make sure everyone is clear, full accountability, and check the fire." The fighter jets circled above, giving a salute, a silent, deadly mid-air acknowledgement of survival. Falcon Lead's voice came through once more. "Captain Monroe, you and your crew just performed an impossible maneuver. Everyone on that plane is alive. Outstanding work." Alyssa's jaw tightened. She exhaled. For the first time in nearly 2 hours, she allowed herself a small, trembling breath. But as she looked at the highway, strewn with debris, emergency vehicles racing toward them, and smoke curling from the engines, she realized something chilling. The storm wasn't done. And neither was the fight to get everyone safe. The smoke still lingered over the narrow stretch of highway. Emergency vehicles streaked toward the scene, their sirens a discordant chorus against the storm's dying growl. Water from fire trucks hissed against the 787's scorched tires and undercarriage, sending plumes of steam into the chilled morning air. But amidst the chaos, 2 figures remained in the cockpit, Alyssa Monroe and Jordan Wells, exhausted, trembling, yet impossibly alive. Alyssa's uniform was darkened with sweat and ash. Her hands, still gripping the yoke, were white-knuckled, her hair plastered against her forehead. Jordan leaned against the console, still pale, trying to process what they had just survived. Outside the cockpit windows, the 2 F-22s circled slowly, like silent sentinels, their sleek forms illuminated by the first rays of sun cutting through the dissipating storm clouds. Falcon Lead's voice crackled through the radio, calm and authoritative. "Captain Monroe, your performance just saved 287 lives. Outstanding. Prepare to exit aircraft safely. We're holding formation until ground crews secure your plane." Alyssa's chest rose and fell with ragged breaths. She whispered to herself, almost inaudibly, "All of them, everyone." Jordan put a hand on her shoulder. "We did it, Alyssa. They're alive, we're alive." She didn't respond immediately. Her eyes scanned the cabin monitors and the faint trail of smoke still curling from the engines. The plane was a wounded giant, and it was still alive because she had fought for every inch. Passengers began to evacuate. The cabin doors opened with a hiss, releasing inflated emergency slides. Flight attendants moved swiftly, guiding passengers down the slides and onto solid ground. A young mother carried her child in her arms, stumbling but steady. The teenage boy with the phone filmed everything, tears streaming down his face as he whispered, "We survived. We actually survived." An elderly man, clutching his rosary, was helped down by a flight attendant. He whispered a quiet prayer, glancing back at the aircraft with a mixture of awe and disbelief. Passengers stumbled across the highway, coughing from the lingering smoke, but alive. The chaos of the storm was replaced with frantic, grateful relief. Jordan looked at Alyssa, his voice low. "Look at them, they're all here. You did that." She allowed herself a small nod, but there was no time to linger. "Check the aircraft. Make sure no fires remain. We can't risk reigniting the engines." Inspecting the wounded giant, Alyssa and Jordan climbed down the emergency slides after ensuring passengers were accounted for. Emergency crews surrounded the 787, spraying water over the scorched tires and inspecting the fuselage for structural damage. The left wing had scraped against the edge of a tree line, leaving deep gouges and stripped paint. The landing gear was mangled, but the plane remained upright. Smoke rose faintly from the rear engines, but flames had been contained. Alyssa walked slowly along the side of the aircraft, surveying every scar. Every dent told a story of survival. Every mark was a testament to the impossible. Jordan joined her. "We were lucky more than lucky. That was skill, guts, and something else." Alyssa shook her head. "No, it was more than that. It was the plane. It wanted to survive. And the fighter jets, they kept us alive when we couldn't see the path." The Midair salute. Above, the two F-22s began a slow, deliberate maneuver. They formed a classic missing man formation, their sleek bodies cutting across the morning sky. It was a mid-air salute, a military tradition reserved for moments of heroism, loss, and survival. Alyssa looked up, shielding her eyes from the sun. The jets spiraled gracefully, then split, one rising high, the other dipping slightly before leveling. It was a silent acknowledgement, a tribute to the impossible feat that had just occurred. Some passengers still standing on the highway pointed upward. "Look," one cried, "they're saluting us." The teenage boy, camera trembling in his hands, captured every second. His mother grabbed him, tears streaking her face. "That's for you," she whispered, nodding toward the jets. Alyssa allowed herself a small, tired smile. The salute wasn't for her alone. It was for everyone who had survived, for the courage that had carried them through, and for the sheer defiance of death they had all experienced together. Media begins to swarm. Within minutes, helicopters appeared over the scene. News crews began transmitting live feeds. The story was already breaking nationwide. Dead engines, 287 lives saved, pilot pulls off impossible landing. Alyssa and Jordan remained calm, letting passengers disembark, but reporters swarmed quickly. Questions came fast. "How did you do it? Weren't you afraid? What was going through your mind?" Alyssa's response was measured. "We survived because we focused on the people, not the plane. Everyone stayed calm, everyone followed instructions, and we had help. Fighter jets guided us. We were never alone." Jordan added quietly, "She kept us alive when nothing else could." The media cameras didn't blink. The story was cinematic, dramatic, and deeply human. Alyssa Monroe, the quiet pilot, had done what no one thought possible. First, survivors' reactions. Passengers slowly gathered on the highway. Some hugged, some cried, some simply stood in stunned silence. The teenage boy whispered into his camera, "I've never seen anything like this. She saved all of us. She's a hero." A mother hugged a flight attendant, tears streaming down both their faces. Thank you for keeping us alive." An elderly man with a cane muttered, "I didn't think I'd see my grandchildren again. God bless her." Alyssa moved among them quietly, making sure everyone was safe. She didn't seek attention. She didn't want accolades. She only wanted to know that everyone was alive. Jordan leaned closer. "You did it, Alyssa. You saved all of them." She nodded, her lips pressed together, but her eyes reflected exhaustion, relief, and the weight of what had just happened. Storm clears. The storm above began to dissipate, clouds breaking to reveal blue sky. Sunlight touched the aircraft, highlighting every scar, every dent, every battle mark. The Boeing 787, battered and scarred, stood as a monument to survival. The fighter jets made one last pass over the scene, then banked and disappeared into the sky, their salute complete. Alyssa exhaled slowly, finally allowing herself to feel the magnitude of what had happened. She had landed a dead plane, guided by instincts, skill, and sheer willpower. 287 lives were intact, and the impossible had been achieved. Reflection. Alyssa walked along the highway, watching emergency crews and passengers interact. Each face told a story: relief, fear, gratitude, awe. She realized that the quiet, calm demeanor she had always maintained had been her greatest weapon. In moments of life and death, silence allowed her to see clearly, think quickly, and act decisively. Jordan approached. "You know," he said softly, "I think history will remember this day, but I'll remember how calm you were, not just for the plane but for everyone on it." She glanced at the 787, the smoking engines, the scraped wings, and whispered almost to herself, "We made it. Against all odds, we made it." And somewhere in the distance, the sound of emergency sirens, helicopters, and human voices filled the air, testament to life continuing, even after the edge of death had passed. The fighter jet's midair salute lingered in her mind, not for her, not for the plane, but for every life that had survived. Alyssa Monroe, the quiet pilot, had become a legend, without fanfare, without arrogance, simply by doing her job with courage and precision in the face of impossible odds. The highway buzzed with activity. Emergency crews moved with precision, guiding passengers to ambulances and safe zones. Cameras flashed, drones hovered, and reporters jostled to capture the moment that would dominate every news outlet in America. Alyssa Monroe stood near the 787, her uniform streaked with ash and sweat, her hair plastered to her forehead but her posture unwavering. She didn't speak much, didn't seek attention, her calm aura cutting through the chaos. Beside her, Jordan Wells helped passengers into waiting vehicles, his hands shaking, adrenaline still thrumming through every nerve. The teenage boy who had recorded the entire descent ran up to Alyssa, phone still in hand. "Captain, I want everyone to see this. You saved us all. We have it. We saw it. The impossible landing." His voice cracked with emotion. Alyssa gave him a small nod, almost imperceptible. "Make sure they know it wasn't me alone. It was the crew, the passengers, the fighter jets. Everyone played a part." He looked up at the sky, and the jets, they were like angels. She allowed herself a faint smile. "Exactly." Media frenzy. Within the hour, helicopters swarmed above. Television networks scrambled to get live feeds. Social media exploded with updates. #dead plane miracle, pilot hero, Boeing saved. The footage from the teenage boy's phone went viral in minutes, showing the descending plane, the storm, and the fighter jets guiding it as if from heaven. Reporters clamored to interview Alyssa. "How did you remain so calm under unimaginable pressure?" one shouted. Alyssa's eyes scanned the crowd. She didn't flinch. "Calm doesn't mean fearless," she said softly. "It means focusing on the people in front of you, not the fear behind you." Another reporter asked, "Did you ever think you wouldn't make it?" She paused, letting the words settle, her gaze drifting to the damaged plane behind her. Every second we were at the edge, but doubt doesn't help you survive. Precision does, teamwork does, trust does." Jordan added quietly, "And she never lost focus, not once. That's what saved us." The cameras caught every word, every expression. The nation was watching, and they were in awe. Emotional reunions. Passengers were ushered to safety, ambulances lining the highway. Mothers clutched children, husbands embraced wives, strangers hugged as relief flooded their faces. Tears mixed with rain and smoke residue, forming a mosaic of pure human emotion. The elderly man with the rosary knelt briefly on the asphalt, whispering a prayer of thanks. A young woman hugged her father, who had guided her and her younger siblings through the cabin chaos. Even the teenage boy, camera still recording, wiped his eyes and whispered, "We all survived. Somehow we all survived." Alyssa observed quietly, allowing herself to absorb the magnitude. 287 lives had just been spared from certain death. She couldn't feel pride, only a profound sense of responsibility that this wasn't over yet. A national recognition begins. By mid-morning, the FAA and Department of Transportation issued preliminary statements praising the crew's skill and composure. Social media algorithms exploded with footage of the fighter jets forming their mid-air salute, clips replayed endlessly. News anchors across the country discussed the quiet girl pilot who landed a dead plane with 287 lives on board, dissecting every maneuver, every second of courage. Every network interviewed experts, aviation specialists, and psychologists analyzing how Alyssa had kept her cool under impossible pressure. Yet she remained distant. She didn't want the accolades, she wanted her passengers safe. She wanted the crew accounted for. She wanted the plane secured. The fighter jet's final gesture. As the chaos continued below, the two F-22s made one last pass above the highway. They performed a slow, precise flyover, forming a near-perfect missing man formation. It was a tribute, a salute, an unspoken recognition of the skill, bravery, and composure displayed in the most extreme circumstances. Passengers watched, pointing upward, crying and whispering. The teenage boy filmed everything, narrating breathlessly. "They're saluting us, no, us and her, the captain, she saved us, and they know it." Alyssa allowed herself a single breath of relief. The salute wasn't for her, not only her. It was for survival, for courage, for the lives that had held on. Alyssa's quiet reflection. Later, as the last passengers were escorted to ambulances, Alyssa stood at the edge of the highway. The storm had cleared completely, leaving soft sunlight bathing the 787 in gold. Every scratch, every dent, every burn mark told the story of the impossible glide, the miracle of controlled descent, and the victory over near-certain disaster. Jordan approached, his voice low. "You know you're going to be famous. National hero, viral videos, awards. But you didn't do it for that, did you?" She shook her head, her eyes scanning the plane. "No, I did it for them. Every single person on that plane. That's why I stayed focused. That's why I stayed calm. Fame is meaningless if everyone else dies." Jordan smiled, shaking his head in awe. "Somehow you always knew." Alyssa didn't respond immediately. Her mind replayed the descent, the storm, the silence, the chaos. She remembered the flicker of partial power, the fighter jets guiding them, and the moments when doubt threatened to overtake her. And she remembered the faces of the passengers, eyes wide, hearts pounding, lives trembling on the edge of impossibility. "They're alive," she whispered. "All of them, that's what matters." National response and hero worship. By the afternoon, social media had become a whirlwind. Clips of the Midair escort, footage from the teenage boy's phone, and news interviews were shared millions of times. Hashtags like Quiet Pilot, #Dead Plane Landing, and Miracle Flight 218 trended worldwide. Aviation enthusiasts analyzed every maneuver, while ordinary citizens shared their awe and gratitude. Memes, heartfelt posts, and tribute videos circulated across platforms. The story became more than a flight. It became a symbol of hope, courage, and human resilience. Alyssa didn't seek it, but it found her. Journalists approached with cameras, lights, and microphones. Politicians called, expressing admiration. Airlines reached out, offering accolades and awards. And yet she remained quiet, letting the survivors take the spotlight. Their relief, their gratitude, their stories, those were the true victory. Personal connection. As the day wound down, Alyssa walked among the passengers one last time. She hugged the little girl from row 12, who clutched her mother's hand, still trembling but smiling. She spoke briefly to the teenage boy who had been filming all morning, capturing moments that would inspire millions. An elderly man approached, holding a small rosary. "Miss Captain, you saved us, every one of us. God bless you." Alyssa's eyes softened. "I only did my job. You all stayed calm, and that made it possible." The man nodded, tears in his eyes. "No, it was you. Quiet and steady even when everything else failed. We owe you our lives." She nodded, letting the words settle. A quiet hero among chaos. As sunset approached, the highway had cleared. The 787 remained, a battered but victorious giant. Emergency crews had secured the area. Passengers were on their way to temporary accommodations. Alyssa Monroe stood beside Jordan, watching the sun glint off the plane's damaged fuselage. The fighter jets had vanished. The storm was gone. Silence returned. She breathed in slowly. For the first time in hours, she allowed herself to feel the enormity of what had been accomplished. She had landed a dead plane, guided 287 lives safely to the ground, and done the impossible. And yet she knew the story was far from over. The world would watch. They would marvel. They would celebrate. But she only cared about one thing. Everyone survived. And in that moment, for Alyssa Monroe, the quiet girl pilot, the impossible had become real. The sun dipped low on the horizon, painting the highway in hues of orange and gold. Emergency vehicles still hummed softly in the background, but the chaos of the morning had subsided into organized calm. The 787, battered, scarred, and triumphant, stood as a silent testament to survival. Alyssa Monroe leaned against the fuselage, exhaustion etched into her features. Sweat and soot streaked her face. Her hands still trembled slightly from the adrenaline that had coursed through her veins for hours. Jordan Wells stood beside her, equally drained, but his eyes glimmered with awe and relief. They were quiet heroes in a world that screamed for recognition. The aftermath, gratitude and all. Passengers, now safely transported to nearby accommodations, were still recounting the morning's miraculous events. Children clutched parents' hands, elderly passengers whispered prayers, and every single soul on board the flight spoke of the calm, steady presence of their captain. A young mother approached Alyssa, tears streaming. "You saved my children. I don't know how to thank you." Alyssa's voice was soft but firm. "You don't need to thank me. You stayed calm. You followed instructions. That's what saved everyone." Nearby, the teenage boy who had filmed the entire descent uploaded his video to social media. Within minutes, millions had seen it. The storm, the fighter jets, the impossible glide, and the final touchdown on a narrow highway. Comments poured in, praising Alyssa, the crew, and even the passengers for their composure. Jordan shook his head, whispering, "She's going to be famous for this, you know." Alyssa gave a small, tired smile. Fame doesn't matter. People being alive, that matters. The official recognition. By the next morning, government officials, FAA representatives, and airline executives were on the scene. Cameras clicked and journalists recorded every detail. The story had become a national phenomenon. Quiet girl pilot lands dead plane with 287 lives on board. The airline's CEO approached Alyssa, extending a hand. "Captain Monroe, you've performed a feat that will be remembered in aviation history. On behalf of our company, thank you, and congratulations." She shook his hand politely, her eyes scanning the gathered passengers and emergency responders. "I only did my job," she said quietly. "Everyone else played their part too." The FAA issued a preliminary report lauding her calm under pressure, her mastery of emergency procedures, and her ability to manage the impossible. Aviation experts called her landing a textbook example of human skill, instinct, and composure overcoming mechanical failure. The fighter jet's final tribute. A video began circulating on social media. It showed the F-22s performing a ceremonial salute above the highway. The lead jet rose sharply, the second dipped in perfect formation, a tribute not only to the pilot but to every life saved that day. Passengers watched the footage in awe. One elderly man whispered, "Those jets, they were angels." Even Alyssa paused, staring at the screen. "Not angels," she said softly. "Guides, they kept us alive when nothing else could." The emotional impact. The passengers' gratitude was profound. Many sent letters, flowers, and heartfelt notes to the airline and to Alyssa personally. Children drew pictures of the plane and the fighter jets. Survivors recounted the ordeal in interviews, always emphasizing one thing: the calm, quiet authority of their pilot. Alyssa received a letter from the mother of the little girl she had seen clutching her parents' hand. It read, simply, "Thank you for saving our lives. You are a hero, even if you never call yourself one." She read it slowly, her eyes moist. She wasn't used to such attention, but she felt the weight of responsibility, the reminder that she had been entrusted with lives and had kept that trust. Media frenzy and viral fame. News outlets ran continuous coverage. Social media exploded. Clips of the landing, the Midair escort, and Alyssa's quiet control went viral. Hashtags like Quiet Pilot, #Dead Plane Landing, and Miracle Flight 218 trended worldwide. Celebrities and public figures praised her heroism. Airlines around the globe shared stories of the landing. Aviation schools used her descent as a case study. Yet throughout it all, Alyssa remained composed, deflecting attention to her crew, the passengers, and the fighter jets that had guided them. Jordan shook his head at one point. "You're going to be on every news channel tonight, every headline, and you're just standing there." Alyssa replied quietly, "Because the story isn't about me. It's about everyone who survived." Reflections on the impossible. That evening, Alyssa sat quietly, replaying the morning's events in her mind. The storm, the loss of power, the silent glide, the fighter jets, and the landing, it all seemed surreal. She thought about each passenger, each child, each elderly face. She remembered the teenage boy filming everything, the mothers holding their children, the flight attendants managing chaos with grace. She realized something profound. Her calmness hadn't just been about skill. It had been about faith in the plane, in the crew, in the passengers, and in herself. That faith had guided them through the impossible. And in a strange way, she felt grateful for the fear. It had sharpened her focus, made her mind clear, and forced her to act decisively. A hero's quiet legacy. Weeks later, Alyssa Monroe was awarded a national honor for her bravery and composure. The ceremony was solemn, filled with applause and recognition. But she didn't seek the spotlight. She shook hands politely, accepted the award with grace, and left the stage quietly, her focus already on the next flight, the next passenger, the next responsibility. The story continued to inspire people around the world. Schools, companies, and communities shared the tale of the quiet girl pilot who landed a dead plane with 287 lives on board. Her calm courage became a symbol, a reminder that even in the face of overwhelming disaster, human skill, teamwork, and composure could defy the impossible. The fighter jets remembered. On a clear morning months later, Alyssa looked up and saw two F-22s streak across the sky in formation. They didn't know she was watching. They didn't need to. She smiled softly. The memory of their guidance, their mid-air salute, remained with her. They had been guardians, protectors, silent angels of metal and speed, ensuring that 287 lives reached the ground safely. She whispered, almost to herself, "Thank you, we survived because of you." The final reflection. Alyssa Monroe returned to the skis months later, piloting another flight, another routine journey. She moved through the cockpit with calm precision, her eyes steady, her mind focused. She thought of the 287 lives, the storm, the impossible glide, and the silent fighter jets. And she knew something essential. Heroes aren't always loud. Legends aren't always celebrated. Sometimes they are quiet, steadfast, and unseen until the world finally notices. And sometimes, a quiet girl pilot can save nearly 300 lives, defy the impossible, and leave the world in awe. Because courage doesn't always roar, sometimes it whispers.